Welcome back to Godless and Grounded. Let's talk about something we rarely question, but that shapes millions of minds every day: religious schooling. At first glance, it might seem harmless. Some people even argue it teaches moral values or builds character. But when you look deeper, beyond the hymns and prayers, what you find is a system that often suppresses creativity, discourages critical thinking, and punishes dissent. This isn't about bashing individuals or their personal faith. It's about looking at the system and what it does to young, impressionable minds. When children are born, they are blank slates, curious, eager, full of imagination. They ask questions constantly. Why is the sky blue? Where did we come from? Why do we die? But in religious schools, those questions often hit a wall. In many religious classrooms, especially those rooted in dogmatic traditions, the answer to every deep question is pre-written in a book. The child is not encouraged to search for the truth. They are told the truth has already been found and questioning it is wrong. That mindset alone is a massive blow to creativity and intellectual growth. Let's take the example of a science class in a religious school. In many such schools, evolution is either ignored or openly attacked. Students are taught that humans were created exactly as they are now, in a garden, by a supernatural being a few thousand years ago. Fossil records, genetics, and mountains of scientific evidence are dismissed as lies or deceptions. Now imagine you're a student with a deep interest in biology. Imagine you want to study how life evolved, how species change, how nature works. But you're constantly told that your curiosity is sinful, that your questions go against divine truth. That's not education. That's indoctrination. And it doesn't stop at science. In subjects like literature, history, and even art, religious schooling often filters content through a narrow lens. Books that don't align with religious values are banned. Historical facts are revised to favor religious narratives. Art is censored for being too expressive, too free, too honest. Students are not taught to appreciate the diversity of thought, culture, or human expression. They are taught to fear it. Take dissent, for example. In any progressive society, dissent is a sign of health. When people are allowed to disagree, they are allowed to think. But in religious schools, disagreement is often labeled as rebellion. You don't question the authority of religious texts. You don't challenge the teachings of clerics. You follow. Obedience is rewarded. Independent thinking is punished. That's why so many people raised in such environments struggle with self-expression even years later. They were never allowed to develop a voice of their own. Let's look at real-world examples. In countries like Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, religious schooling is deeply embedded in the education system. Madrasas and religious institutions often dominate early education. Children spend hours memorizing holy texts word for word, sometimes without even understanding the language. The goal is not to understand or interpret, but to repeat and obey. These children are trained not to think but to recite. Meanwhile, subjects like critical thinking, philosophy, or comparative religion are nowhere to be found. And yet, these are exactly the kinds of subjects that help children grow into thoughtful, curious, and tolerant adults. Even in Western countries, where religious schooling is less extreme, the effects are still visible. Take Catholic schools in the United States or Christian academies in parts of Europe. Students are often taught that homosexuality is a sin, that premarital sex is evil, that women must submit to male authority. These aren't just abstract doctrines. They shape how students view the world. They shape how they treat others and how they think about themselves. And once again, questioning these teachings is discouraged, if not outright punished. Think about what that does to a child who is gay, or a child who doesn't believe, or a girl who wants to pursue science, or leadership, or simply live life on her own terms. They're told, not just by parents or peers, but by an entire system of authority, that something is wrong with them. That's not just damaging, it's traumatic. Now compare that to secular schooling. In a secular classroom, students can ask difficult questions without fear. They can challenge ideas, read diverse authors, explore controversial topics. They're not told what to think, they're taught how to think. And that makes all the difference. You see, creativity doesn't come from memorization. It doesn't come from blind obedience. Creativity is the ability to connect new ideas, to imagine alternatives, to solve problems in ways no one has before. That kind of thinking thrives in environments where questioning is encouraged, not silenced. And unfortunately, religious schooling, by its very nature, is built to silence questions. Even when religious schools teach regular subjects like math, literature, or science, they often do so within the boundaries of faith. For instance, instead of teaching literature as an exploration of human experience, it becomes a moral sermon. Instead of teaching history in all its complexity, it's trimmed down to a story of divine plans and religious heroes. Instead of seeing math as a tool for discovery, it's praised as evidence of a divine order. The subject itself becomes less important than the religious lens it's filtered through. And slowly, the student stops seeing knowledge as something to explore and starts seeing it as something to obey. There's another subtle but powerful effect of religious schooling. It teaches children to divide the world into us and them. Those who believe and those who don't. Those who follow the faith and those who are lost. That kind of thinking creates mental walls. It narrows empathy. It stops people from seeing others as equals. And without empathy, there can be no true creativity. No meaningful art. No honest philosophy. Because creativity requires us to see from different perspectives, to step into other lives, other minds. Religious schooling, especially the strict kind, often trains people to do the opposite. Now, some people will argue that religious schools can still produce creative people. And yes, there are exceptions. There are religious individuals who think deeply, create beautiful art, write powerful books, but they succeed despite the system, not because of it. Often, they had to unlearn what was drilled into them. They had to fight through guilt, fear, and years of mental conditioning just to reach a place where they could think freely. In many cases, the most creative and original thinkers were people who left religious schooling. People who dared to question, who walked away from rigid systems, who embraced doubt and curiosity. Think about writers like Salman Rushdie, scientists like Richard Dawkins, or philosophers like Bertrand Russell. They didn't come out of religious schools with their minds fully open. They broke out of them. Even ancient history gives us clues. The golden ages of philosophy, science, and art, like in ancient Greece or during the Enlightenment, flourished when religion was pushed to the background and free thought was allowed to grow. The more religion took control, like during the Dark Ages, the more inquiry and progress were shut down. In the end, children deserve better. They deserve to ask hard questions, to explore without fear, to imagine new worlds. Religious schooling, when it enforces rigid dogmas and punishes dissent, does the opposite. It hands them a script and says, read this, believe this, never stray. But life isn't a script. It's a journey of curiosity, trial and error, and discovery. The more we let children think for themselves, the more we empower them to build a better future. And that's really what's at stake. This isn't just about individual creativity, it's about our shared future. A world full of people who think critically, who solve problems, who imagine better ways to live. That's the kind of world we all benefit from. But that kind of world begins in the classroom. It begins with the freedom to ask why. So when we look at religious schooling, we shouldn't just ask what it teaches. We should ask what it prevents. What thoughts were never spoken? What ideas were never explored? What young minds were quietly taught to stay silent? Because the real cost of religious schooling isn't just bad education, it's the loss of potential. The silencing of millions of minds who could have created, questioned, and changed the world. If only they had been allowed to ask.